Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Beth. I am a 36-year-old attorney living in the DC area with my husband, and on this snowy day in mid-March, I will be filming a swatch video of the new NARS Summer Unrated eyeshadow palette. So this is a brand new release from NARS, and I wasn't initially going to pick this up based on the pictures. I had purchased a NARS palette last fall. This is their Climax palette, which is also, I think, limited edition, but this one is still available. And it had been a while since I had purchased an eyeshadow palette from NARS prior to picking up this Climax palette. And I was kind of surprised by how much I enjoyed it. So that, I guess, piqued my interest a little bit in terms of a new NARS palette. But something about this palette, I think, is a little bit more distinctive, I guess, than some NARS releases. But recently I decided to film a full face of NARS, which I still have yet to do, because I just purchased their new NARS light reflecting foundation, and I realized that I did have a lot of NARS products that I collected over the years. So I decided to film that video, and when I was thinking about the eyeshadow I would use, I do like this palette, but I think in that video I might want to try to create kind of a monochromatic makeup look, or duochromatic maybe, of the Orgasm and Laguna shades that NARS is so well known for. And this is a really great kind of more grungy fall color story, but it wasn't quite the look I wanted to incorporate into that video. So when NARS released this palette, it is much more summery, as the name would suggest, and you can kind of see a little bit of the color story on the back here. So I decided to go ahead and pick it up and feature it in that video, and also film some swatches of it for you guys. So this palette does retail for $59. I purchased mine from the NARS website. And I guess a note on the ordering experience, I do have the shop runner feature, which is supposed to get you free 2-day shipping on participating websites. And I did purchase another item with it as well that I think did arrive in 2 days. It was shipped separately, but for whatever reason, this palette shipped separately and it arrived a day later, which is not the end of the world, but I just wanted to let you know that, especially if you do end up picking it up with another item and you open a box to find it missing. It's also on the Ulta website. I think that is the only other retailer where you can currently purchase it. So as I said, this is a limited edition eyeshadow palette featuring 16 shades in matte, shimmer, and glitter finishes. And this 16 shade format is the largest palette that NARS creates, according to their website, and each shadow is going to be 1 gram, so you get 16 total grams of product in this eyeshadow palette. So the way they describe it is sensual, dimensional, eyes tell all. Passion meets pleasure in a palette of 16 shadows in matte, shimmer, and glitter finishes, featuring best-selling NARS favorites Laguna, Orgasm, and Taj Mahal, plus complementary shades in a range of matte neutrals, warm bronzes, and exotic pink tones. Intense pigments create a high-impact effect that lasts. And again, this is limited edition. Okay, so I thought I would just give you a little bit of the rundown here with the packaging. So you can see that pink foil there, and this might be out of focus. As you can see, it has a 12-month shelf life, and it is made in Italy. And here we just have the name of the palette. And then on the back here, we have all of the ingredients, and again, a little picture of the palette. And I did want to draw your attention to the fact that it does contain talc and carmine. You can see carmine right there. So if you are sensitive to any of those ingredients, just be aware of that. Okay, so when we open the palette, it comes like so, and I have already taken this out, so it may have been kind of moved around a little bit. But you can see it has a very reflective pink cover there, which will undoubtedly collect fingerprints. And then on the back here, we have the names of the shades, the shelf life, and the fact that it is made in Italy. I did note though that this particular black packaging doesn't seem to be the same as some of their like soft touch products, which if you've owned any of these products over time, they can kind of feel a bit sticky, which is a little unpleasant. So just wanted to let you know that it does feel different, but I can't say for sure if it is different. Okay, so flipping it over and opening it, it doesn't have a magnetic closure, it just has your standard latch, like so, and those are the shades. You do get a nice mirror here, and it will kind of stand up if you want it to. So when I did get the palette in person, like I said, I had purchased this Climax palette, which is a 9-pan. And if you think of the ColourPop 9-pan palettes, for example, like this is smaller than a ColourPop palette, but it's not that much smaller. I don't know, maybe it's just relative. But the overall palette and the pans did seem a little small. So when I saw it was $59, I thought that was actually a pretty good value for 16 shades, especially considering the prices of some of the other NARS palettes. But I wanted to compare it, for example, to a Natasha Denona Midi palette, which you can see is definitely a larger component. With the Natasha Denona palettes like this, you're getting 15 shades. And these do have the name printed on them, so that kind of takes up some space. But this contains 19.25 grams for 15 shades. This also has a 24-month shelf life. And these retail for $65. So, you know, if you're comparing one to the other, most Natasha Denona palettes aren't limited edition, especially these Midi ones. Some of them have been discontinued after a while, but they're not kind of more seasonal products. So I just wanted to kind of present that in terms of a comparison. As you can see on the back here, there are those little holes too where you can pop out the shadows and either put them in a magnetic palette or rearrange them with other palettes. You can do kind of whatever you want. Okay, so taking another look here at this particular palette, a couple things I wanted to highlight from their kind of application tips. So according to NARS, each of these rows is designed to create a complete eye look. So it says you can use each row individually for 4 distinct looks or mix and match across the entire palette for endless artistry. So if you look at a palette this size and feel kind of overwhelmed, you can just stick to one row at a time. So just use 4 shadows in a look, and that should get you something that looks fairly cohesive. And as far as kind of my application techniques and everything, a couple things I did want to call out here. So they recommend to use the shadow directly on top of the tinted smudge-proof eyeshadow base, which I thought was kind of interesting that they specified their tinted eyeshadow base as opposed to any of them. So I do have the tinted smudge-proof eyeshadow base in light, which to be honest is not my favorite. That is what light looks like, and it does come in different shades, so I think it's meant to kind of match your skin tone, or at least kind of come close to it. This is their original, which pretty much just goes on clear. And I do like the original. I haven't used it in a while here for no particular reason other than I've, I guess, purchased other ones to try and haven't come back to it. So I will use these primers on my eyes when I do my full face of NARS and I use this palette. I might use one primer on one eye and one primer on the other, just so you can kind of see the different effects that they give. But for arm swatches, it's not really practical to use this style of primer because I feel like it would just use up a lot of product and be difficult to dispense. So usually what I use is the Lorac Behind the Scenes Eye Primer. I have a little kind of collection of samples. I think just about all of these are kind of on their last legs though, so I might have to pull out a different type of primer to use. So I'll let you know what I end up using, but I do like to swatch on a primed arm. I might have to kind of revisit that technique going forward if I can't find a good primer to use, but anyway. And then they recommend that you use their number 24 high pigment eyeshadow brush, which I will show a picture of on the screen here. It actually reminds me a bit of a Rephr brush that they released over the holidays, but I don't have either brush to be able to say for sure. I did want to mention I'm going to be showing you some Rephr brushes here that I use to swatch with, and I am not a Rephr affiliate other than I create reward style links to their products. So I can generate commission that way, but I don't have any other kind of relationship with Rephr. I've purchased all of their brushes myself. But anyway, in early April, Rephr will be restocking their concept store. So I think their entire website might be 40% off. So if you've been contemplating some Rephr brushes, that would definitely be a good time to pick them up, especially any of the ones that I'm about to show you. So for the matte shades, I like to use their number 2 brush, which is very similar to the old MAC 239 brush. This is a little natural hair shader. And I have 2 here. The shadows in this palette aren't super deep, and they also seem to kind of go from light to dark. So I might not need to use the second one, but when I'm swatching shades and I swatch a dark shadow and then want to swatch a lighter shadow, I just like to have a second one just in case. Okay, and then for the metallic shades, I will be using the Rephr number 21 brush. This is very similar to the MAC 242. This is a brush I think that the late Mel Thompson asked Rephr to create, so I just wanted to mention that and give credit to her. But this is a mix of synthetic and natural hair. So I have 2, and I like to do both dry and wet brush swatches for the metallic shadows. The NARS website does say that these can be applied wet or dry. And to wet my brush, I like to use the Tarte Maracuja Miracle Mist to wet them. So I try to keep one for dry swatches and one for wet swatches. And to clean my brushes in between, I have the Sigma Switch here, which is like a silicone matte. So this is really good at kind of removing the shadow in between swatching. And lastly, they say here that you can layer glitter shades on top of any eye look as a last light catching step. So we might end up with some shades that are more toppers than kind of pigmented shadows. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I think I might actually end up using this Smashbox 24-hour photo finish shadow primer. I haven't used this before for a swatch video, but same kind of dispensing mechanism as the Lorac. So this will be a bit of an experiment, but we'll just see kind of how it goes. I do choose to use a primer, by the way, because I always use one on my eyes. Oh, it's a bit thicker than I expected. So I feel like it's the best way for me to be able to judge them just based on swatches alone. Okay, so going into this first row here, we have the shade Isla, which is a matte light tan. Which looks like so. Well, I guess that's where it's gonna go. Next up we have Crete, which is a soft pink gold. Next up is, and apologies if I butcher this, Spiaggia Rosa, which is a matte dirty peach. It's a fun color. And then finally, of course, we have Orgasm, which is the pinky pink with golden shimmer. And in mine in particular, I did want to point this out before I swatch it. It seems like there's a little bit of like pigment from another shadow, hopefully, that got in there. I don't know if you can see where it looks a bit darker. So hopefully it's just something that happened in packaging. But I did get a brand new palette that had mold in it once, so I am a little cautious. Okay, so that is a really pretty shade. And to be honest, I don't love the blush shade Orgasm because for me personally, I just think it's too glittery for my preference. So I actually prefer, there's a blush called Deep Throat, which is similar. Which, to be honest, I probably haven't pulled out in years, but I remember purchasing that shade like a decade ago because even at that time, everyone was talking about Orgasm, and I just wanted something a little bit different. So those mattes both applied beautifully with a brush. I like it when mattes have almost that slight sheen to them. Okay, so going in with my dry brush into, this is why it's annoying when the shadow names aren't on here. This is Crete. Which doesn't seem to be doing the most. I just watched the video that Jen Love did of the new Glam Like Kisses collection. And she said in that video that she hadn't filmed swatches in a while, but she kind of went into why swatches are helpful, especially when you show like a brush swatch, like the different application techniques, because it at least gives you an idea of how something might perform on the eyes, and you can see it in real time as well, so you know kind of how much someone is building up a shade, if they're having difficulty, that kind of thing. Okay, so wetting the different brush. And as I always say, you can either wet your brush and then go in, or depending on the formula, if you're able to pick up a decent amount of shadow without dampening your brush, then you can do that and then spray the brush after. Because NARS specifically says you can use this wet or dry, I'm not too concerned with that. And some of these shades you can see, I think the finger swatch of Orgasm I think was the best. So what I like to do sometimes, okay, there I managed to get a decent amount. What I like to do is kind of maybe get the outline of where I want this shade to be on the lid with a brush, because I have hooded eyes and sometimes it's just easier to kind of get in all the little nooks and crannies with a brush. And then if I want to tap over the top with a finger to kind of increase the impact, then I can do that with a finger. Okay, so that is the first row. So you could even treat this as two duos and have more of a peachy eye here and then more of a neutral eye here. But I think this would create a very kind of spring, summery, bright look. This shadow doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot, but if you don't like a super intense foily shade, then you might like that kind of texture. All right, so going through it, we have Isla finger brush. We have Crete finger dry brush, wet brush. We have Spiaggia Rosa finger and dry brush. And then we have Orgasm finger, dry brush, and wet brush. So it seems like this primer might have been a little bit more difficult to remove. I just used like a makeup remover wipe and you can see I kind of scratched myself. So I do remove the swatches and then reapply a primer in between each row, and I try to do what I can to create the same base for each row, but every time I take it off and remove it, it's a slightly different kind of set of conditions, I think. Okay, so going into this shade, which is Laguna This is a satin warm brown. So this might have a bit more of a sheen to it. Depending on, let's see. I'm not sure which brush I might want to use for that one. Next up we have Satisfy, which is a champagne shimmer, which is definitely a kind of chunkier shade. I think this is what I wanted Crete to be, and it wasn't. So that is Satisfy, definitely more satisfactory for me. The next one is Palmetto, and this is a sparkling metallic gold. Another beautiful shade, but you know, a lot of brands do a shade pretty similar to that. And then finally we have Komodo Island, which is a chocolate with gold glitter. So we'll see how that one does. Okay, so for this first Laguna shade, I guess I can try both a dry brush with this little rougher to see how this performs. Seems pretty nice like that. And then I think I can also try just using a dry brush here as well. I think either one is fine. I think the shadow does apply more like a matte than a metallic. Okay, so going into Satisfy, dry brush here. Going into Palmetto. You can see I'm able to pick up a little bit more shadow on these brushes, even with a dry brush. And then finally, let's see how Komodo Island performs. The shadow almost reminds me of, I don't know, like brown sugar on top of a dessert or something. Okay, so with my damp brush going into Satisfy again, and you can see how much I was able to pick up. I don't know that the effect is necessarily any better with the wet brush. And then again, after dampening my brush, going into Palmetto. If you don't like a really kind of chunky look on the lids, then you probably don't want to dampen it. When I am applying a shadow, I typically go in first with a dry brush, and then from there kind of determine what that shadow needs to perform the way I want it to. Getting some fallout. So usually what I do is just stick with a dry brush and then use a finger to amp up the intensity if I want to, but I think with this one in particular, you can see a slight difference in effect depending on how you apply it. So starting over here, we have Laguna with the finger, and then these are both dry brush swatches, but I use those two different brushes as you saw. This one is Satisfy. This is finger, dry brush, wet brush. This is Palmetto, finger, dry brush, wet brush. And then finally we have Komodo Island, which is finger, dry brush, and wet brush. And looking at it as a whole before I wipe it off, again, I think you could create a very kind of neutral but summery and bronzy look with this particular row of shades. Like I would probably put Laguna in the crease and then put Satisfy on like the inner corner, inner third of the lid, then put Palmetto in the outer third, and then kind of deepen it up with Komodo Island and maybe put this on the lower lash line, something like that. So that's just an idea for how you might use these shades. Okay, so for row number 3, we have Palmas, which is a matte red brown. Next up we have Bird of Paradise, which is a sparkling rose gold. And then we have Taj Mahal, which is a burnt tangerine with gold shimmer. And I do have samples of the 3 face products that they talked about, so Orgasm, Laguna, and Taj Mahal. Laguna is a bronzer, and Taj Mahal and Orgasm are both blushes. So I thought I would swatch the eyeshadow next to those at the end here. And the last shadow is Love on Fire, which is a copper glitter. And that is very glittery. You might actually want a glitter glue for that shadow. So I think we really only have one matte in this particular row. So going in again to Bird of Paradise. It's not doing the most. And then Taj Mahal. So when they said to tap on glitter, I don't know if they were just referring to this shade. I think this is the only one that's actually called a glitter. It reminds me a bit of a nail polish that Sephora released when they did their like Tangerine Tango collection with Pantone, which was many years ago at this point, but anyway. All right, so with a damp brush going into Bird of Paradise. About the same, I think. And then Taj Mahal. A little bit more vibrant with the wet brush. Yeah, I don't think a brush is really going to be the ideal application method for the glitter, but it's a glitter. Okay, so let's take a closer look. So we have Palmas. This is the finger and that is the brush. Sometimes mattes just don't swatch well, especially if the arm is slightly damp or whatever. And then we have Bird of Paradise. So that is finger, dry brush, wet brush. Taj Mahal, which is finger, dry brush, wet brush. And then finally, what I attempted to do with Love on Fire, so that is finger, dry brush, and wet brush. And yeah, this whole color story kind of reminds me of that Sephora Tangerine Tango Color of the Year collection. So this is definitely a more kind of peachy orange quad here if you want to look at it that way. So less neutral than the prior one, but still I think very pretty, very summery. All right, so last row here we have Tikahau, maybe? It's a matte mocha brown. Again, the freshly primed arm. And that's partly why I like to, when I do apply a primer to my eyelids, set it with either a light shadow or a translucent powder, because that way I know the mattes that I apply on top will blend evenly. Next up we have Summer Moon, which is a cool pink shimmer. It's a very kind of chunky shade. Almost looks a bit kind of a lilac. It's like a lilac rose gold. It's pretty. It actually looks, I think, prettier on the swatch than it did in the pan. Next up we have Bad Intentions, which is a raspberry shimmer. Also very pretty. And then finally we have a shade called Fetish that is a shimmering espresso. Doesn't seem to have a lot of shimmer. I mean, I guess it does. It's really more of a satin, I think, than anything. Okay, so going into Tikau again. I have to look up how to pronounce some of these. And then for the dry brush, going into Summer Moon. It's definitely one of those kind of flaky, foily, metallic shades. And then going into Bad Intentions. And let's see how a dry brush does with Fetish. This is another one where I would probably just treat it as a matte. So if I go in with this other brush, I guess it depends how much pigment you want, really. All right, so wet brush into Summer Moon. I'm curious how this does. As you can see, you pick up a lot and then, you know, kind of create some fallout. So I always try to remind myself to do my eyes first, unless I'm just doing something really kind of basic, but just be aware of potential fallout. And then squeezing in here with Bad Intentions on a wet brush. Also picked up a good amount. And that one did just fine as well. And then I think just for fun, let's try the wet brush into Fetish. When we get closer to my wrist wrinkles, that can kind of throw off a shade, but yeah, I would probably stick with a dry brush with this one, and then depending on how you're placing it, either build it up or just go in with a more kind of dense type brush. All right, so starting off here with Tikau. This is the finger and the brush. Next, Summer Moon. This is the finger, dry brush, and wet brush. Next up, we have Bad Intentions. So finger, dry brush, wet brush. And then finally, we have Fetish, and we have, let's remember how we did this. Finger, dry, 21 brush, dry, number 2 brush, and then finally wet, number 21 brush. The shine on that one's really pretty. All right, so I don't know if you'll be able to kind of see the fallout as I'm cleaning off my arm. And you know, I'm a little bit more aggressive with the pans when I'm swatching than I might be when I'm just applying it, because, you know, I'm not trying to always pick up a good amount of pigment when I'm applying it to the eyes, but I do like to kind of give you the after. Okay, so as I said, I wanted to do some comparison swatches with the shades that they mentioned. So we have the Orgasm blush. This is a mini. So that is the Orgasm blush. Just put it next to the eyeshadow for a second here. And then this is the Laguna bronzer, which looks like so. And then finally, this is a sample that I got with this recent order. This is the shade in Taj Mahal. And I'm guessing this is an older style of sample. So it looks like they've moved to this one. This, by the way, was actually, it was like an Ulta birthday gift one year. But anyway. Okay here, so let's go ahead and swatch the eyeshadows. And this is really just more for kind of a color comparison than anything. So that is Laguna. And I'll go ahead and swatch the Laguna bronzer. I think the Laguna bronzer actually has a bit more of a sheen to it, which is interesting. I'll just do this on my hand to be easy. And there's no primer or anything on my hand. So there we have the eyeshadow and the bronzer. And of course, one of the oldest tricks in the book is just to use your bronzer as an eyeshadow, especially in the crease, because then you're creating that warmth and that dimension, and you don't have to reach for a separate eyeshadow. But if you are a fan of Laguna and want kind of a dedicated eyeshadow formula, and eyeshadows are typically more pigmented than their blush counterpart. So I think there you can see the difference in texture and opacity with the Orgasm shade. So yeah. All right, and then finally for Taj Mahal. I don't think I've ever applied Taj Mahal to my cheeks. And the blush actually seems like it's a much more kind of vibrant orange, which, if anything, I would think is easier to apply to the eyes. But if you have a deeper skin tone, you might really like that depth of blush. If blushes are deemed eye safe, which the brand may or may not indicate because they're not intended to be used on the eye area, and to be eye safe, it generally just means that the product doesn't contain pigments that will stain or otherwise irritate the eye area. And sometimes that's just like a regulatory thing. It's not like really going to be an issue. But you could try applying your blushes to your eyes as well, or just use like an opaque highlighter. So you can have fun with your makeup and experiment with different ways of using different products. I think that's a very kind of makeup artist thing to do, is have one product that can be multifunction, like we've seen the Hindash palettes recently kind of embrace that concept. But anyway, just know that not all ingredients are approved for use on the eyes. Okay, so let's take another close look at this palette. So as I said, I wasn't immediately inspired or wowed by this palette. I think a lot of people have rightly said that a lot of NARS palettes tend to look kind of the same. So if you already have one, you know, you probably don't need to rush out and get this one unless it just really speaks to you for some reason. I think it's a good palette. I don't regret purchasing it. I think I also had like a like 15% off code that NARS sent me that I was able to use, so I got it at a slight discount, and I also got like the little freebies like I showed you, so that helps. But yeah, I think most of these shadows perform pretty well. It's just a matter of kind of what look you want to create with these shades and whether the particular shade will perform the way you want it to. Like, as I mentioned, the difference in these two shades here. So yeah, so I don't regret buying it. I think it's a good quality palette. So it's just a matter of what you already have, and you know, if this is going to be your new everyday palette, just be aware that you're not getting the most product per shadow, and maybe take a look at some Natasha Denona palettes because you are getting more product in those. You're getting one less shade, but like NARS put a glitter in this palette, so it's not like everyone is going to be using that on a daily basis. So as a potential alternative, of course we have the Sephora sales event coming up, so the Natasha Denona palettes will be 20% off at Sephora. This NARS palette I think is only at NARS and Ulta, at least for the time being, so you're a little bit more limited. So I don't think like these two that I'm showing you are dupe palettes, but I think you could create probably some similar looks. I also have the Sunrise, for example. And I think the retro, like I showed you at the beginning. So I'm not going to go as far as trying to dupe the NARS palette. I just wanted to quickly show you some different palettes kind of at a similar price point and size. I also got the Patrick Ta palette finally, not too long ago. I haven't even used it yet. So just so you can see kind of the color stories side by side here. With Patrick Ta, you're only getting 12 shades and 2 of them are cream. But this has a net weight of, so the cream shades, you're getting 2 of those, and those are 1.85 grams. And the powder shades are 1.8 grams, and there's 10 of them. So these shades are a little bit bigger than these ones. All right, so that's it for the Summer Unrated palette from NARS. I think it's a good quality palette. If you like the look of it and you purchase it, I don't think you'll be disappointed, but I don't think you need it or that you'll be missing out if you don't purchase it. But yeah, I'll have it linked below if you would like to use that link or any of the other items I showed you today. And until next time, I hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.